Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to 21st Century HR Live, Episode 2. I am your host, Lars Schmidt, and I am really excited to be joined today by a good friend of mine and somebody who I certainly am always learning from within the industry. Hung Lee is the founder and CEO of Workshape.io. He's also the curator for Recruiting Brainfood. For those of you that aren't familiar with Recruiting Brainfood, I hope to fix that in the next 30 minutes. Recruiting Brainfood is, in my mind, the best email newsletter and what is now kind of a global community of mostly recruiters, but also talent and HR tech practitioners and leaders all around the world. So Hung has this really eclectic taste for knowledge and information and news. And so Brainfood, when you get the newsletter in your inbox every Sunday morning, I always joke to him, there's things in there that I knew I wanted to learn about. And there's things in there that I never even knew existed. And I learned from picking that up. So he's built a tremendous community over the last couple of years. And specifically, I want to really get into him with last week, he hosted a 24-hour live stream Recruiting Brainfood marathon, 24 hours. So I want to see if you slept, and I hope you slept a long time because that's brutal for any human to go through. But I also want to just get under the hood and figure out how he actually made that happen, how he made it work, how many speakers, what he learned. And most importantly, I want to bring your questions as well. So this is an interactive show. So wherever you're streaming this content right now, if you have questions for Hung, just pop those into the comments section. I'll do my best to cover them with him live on air. So with that, let me bring Hung on and we'll get things kicked off. I'm now joined by my man, Hung Lee. How are you, Hung?
I'm all right, man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. So I want to dig into so many things with you, but before we even get started, for viewers that may not be as familiar with you, I'd love to have you start with just a bit of an introduction and background on you.
Sure. So my name is Hung Lee. Basically, I still call myself a recruiter, even though I haven't actively recruited for probably a decade now. But basically, I've done a bunch of things in recruitment, agency, in-house training, set up my own startup, Workshape.io, matching platform for software engineers. But I'm probably more well-known now for the newsletter and the broadcast channels that I run with Recruiting Brainfood, which is mainly a weekly newsletter that I send out every Sunday, curated content, Brainfood for your week ahead for recruiters, basically.
Yeah, so let's get all the way back at first to Brainfood. Like, where did the name Recruiting Brainfood come from? Where did the idea for the newsletter come from? Like, how did that? I know it's evolved and it's had a lot of different iterations since you launched it, but take me back to the beginning. How did that all get started for you?
It actually wasn't the name of the newsletter. It was the strapline. So for a long time, maybe the first half year of it, so perhaps first 20 or 30 issues of the newsletter, it was actually called On Hiring. And the strapline was, it's recruiting brain food for your week ahead. And that was the mission, really. Let's give recruiters and TA people some intellectual stimulation, some interesting tidbits, some practical tips, some motivation. Job's hard. Let's give people kind of the moral support they need to get into the week ahead. So it was really a description of what I wanted to achieve: give Recruiting Brainfood top quality content to that recruiting community.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I've always been curious about in reading that. You know, when you follow a lot of, and this isn't even just recruiting, like any industry newsletter, often you're going to have, similar types of content that are, for the most part, all related to that topic, right? It could be design, it could be product management, it could be engineering. But what I've always dug about Recruiting Brainfood, and I remember actually on Recruit from back in the day, the format and the content is broadly kind of eclectic, and it spans topics that have nothing to do with recruiting, and obviously some things that are very much in the sweet spot of recruiting. And this, you and I have connected, our relationship goes beyond the newsletter. So I'm also familiar with just the kind of things that you read and the kind of things that you share. So from a sourcing perspective, you're one of the more kind of deeply and broadly sourced people in the industry. Like, where does that come from? Where does your curiosity around all of those things stem from?
Oh, I mean, I think curiosity, everyone has it, right? We might have it beaten out of us at some point because we get penalized for asking those wider questions. But I'm always very interested to spot patterns in different disciplines and can they be applied from one discipline to the next? And you find broadly they can, So maybe this is like a search for universal truth. I don't know. Maybe I need to find God in some way. But basically, I'm trying to see, okay, this is a bit of interesting stuff from ecology, let's say. But you can see there's some lessons we can learn from that could be applied to the world of recruiting. What can we learn from this? And there's stuff you can pick out from almost any discipline that could be applied to any other discipline. And I think that's part of the reason why I've always been kind of curious generally. I don't have a problem with boredom, is the truth, because I think there's wonder in the mundane. Sometimes there's wonder in everything, really. You just have to go ahead and think slightly differently about it. And Brainfood is just an extension of that. I think there's lots of interesting sources out there from history, from philosophy, from science, that I think is readily applicable to the work we do. And if I think so, then we put it in there. Hopefully what I can also do with the Cameo portraits which is basically the copy, is sort of when I describe the link, is to also introduce why I think it should be there. What is applicable about this thing about art that, recruiters might find an angle on.
Yeah, I think that the why piece is really important. And I've compiled newsletters over the years. I'm not now. So I definitely can recognize what separates a great newsletter from a good newsletter. And I think for me, when I did them in the past, it was mostly a curation, but it wasn't the contextualized curation. I think that's what makes Brainfood so interesting, is it's Hung's perspective on why that news is important, not just sharing that news. And I think that's one of the things that subscribers and readers have come to really value about the newsletter, because it's not just, hey, read this. This is why you should read this. And I think that kind of Hung magic and framing around the content itself is what really I think has made the newsletter so successful. Let's get into the marathon, and kind of while we're teeing this up, I just want to remind viewers out there, if you have questions for Hung about either recruiting Brainfood, anything he's working on, anything he's seeing, feel free to ask those in the comments of wherever you're streaming this, and I'll try to cover them with him on air. So let's get into 24 hours. So you host a weekly video, live video streaming show on Recruiting Brainfood, where you kind of recap some of the news articles and some of the resources from the newsletter from the past week. But last week you decided to do something radically different and actually do a 24-hour marathon of Recruiting Brainfood. So take me back to the beginning. Like, where did that idea come from? How did you decide you're going to execute it? How did you figure out how to pull in speakers and organize the rooms and do everything that it took to put that together in a pretty short period of time?
First, the origin story. Truth is, I have no idea. I'm trying to think, where did this idea come from? And I can't actually recall the moment when that happened. It just seemed to be, it was there as an idea, and before you know it, there was people talking about it in the back office. It wasn't just me organizing it. So I had kind of friends, allies, collaborators who essentially thought, yeah, this is a good idea, let's give it a shot. The general theme, though, I think was there for a little while, and basically the marathon was a response to two things I was seeing in the marketplace. Number one, I was seeing a lot of anxiety, a lot of economic pressure, a lot of insecurity. Everyone was getting crushed, basically, with the collateral damage that was coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Lots of our friends being made redundant, let go, having to make people redundant, etc. And when you're running a reasonably large community, you end up getting a lot of that people messaging you, right? They tell you about it, and they ask you to help. And I was super frustrated because of I was unable to help. I was not able to provide any support to those folks. Then on the other hand, we saw great efforts from community contributors who were stepping up and doing great things. One of whom is you. So when you were coming out with the coronavirus guidebook for communication. And I was promoting that in the newsletter, and I was thinking, I want to keep promoting this because people need to know about it. It's really important. But then I realized, how can I get even more people to look at this? And I saw other companies and other people put amazing stuff together, and I was feeling under pressure to promote everything. And I thought, why don't I absolutely promote everything? But the best way to do that is not through a weekly newsletter. It's actually to gather everyone together in effectively a stunt, and get everyone together. Let's call it a big marathon. And have everyone connect and learn about each other, tell each other the issues we're encountering, and then maybe discover some opportunities and solutions to those problems. So that was basically the kernel of it. How it started as an idea, I've got no idea itself, but yeah, the core theme was really those two tension points, sort of those two phenomena, should I say. A cry for help from the community, and then the supply of help from folks like you, to be honest.
Yeah. So, you get into the logistics of that 24 hours of programming, like that's massive. And for people that are familiar with events, like, what goes on to putting on a one-day event, right? With a couple speakers and maybe a keynote. This is a 24-hour event. So how many speakers were there? How many sessions were there? How did you go about kind of sourcing and having your community step up and volunteer to actually present and kind of go through the interview process with you?
Okay, so raw numbers, I've actually got them because I did them today. Raw numbers was 2,700 people attended it. 1,000 people concurrently live was the top, and then the thing broke. So then we were not able to count how many more people were watching it live. 87 sessions actually concurrently. So in other words, across 3 tracks. Speakers, there was something like 40 odd speakers, and there was something like 38 sponsors, company coming in. The sponsors, quote unquote, no one was paying money. They were literally just donating, what I call community plus offerings. So they were already doing cool stuff for the community. And I said, right, I'm going to call you a sponsor. Come on and demo your cool stuff to this audience. I'm going to just treat you as a sponsor. And yeah, moving beast, man. I mean, what can I say? How do you organize it? Dude, I will say this now. It was out of control from the moment it started. And I felt very much like I had saddled a Mustang and I was like riding this wild beast, and the saddle came off within a couple of hours of me getting on this horse, and I was hanging on to the manes and getting kicked in the face by the hooves all the way through to the end. By no means it was in control, but there was a lot of great people who volunteered themselves to start putting it together. So I had people in Australia, in US, in the UK, just literally dropping in and doing stuff, and I was just saying yes to it. So in effect, they were saying, "Hung, yeah, we're going to do it this way." I said, "Yep, go, no problem, go ahead. We're going to put this website up and collect registrations like this. What do you think?" I said, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." And it was me just yesing their ideas, more or less.
Right.
And that really did help do it. I mean, it was radical delegation to a certain degree. But then there was some times where I had to come in as well and kind of override a few things, which I don't like to do, but I spotted a few things that needed to happen. Principally, I needed to stay on screen for 24 hours. And because by the time the word got out that I was going to try and do this, the original plan was I was going to take breaks. I had guest hosts coming in. I had kind of you lined up. I was thinking maybe I can get Lars in to do a few things. And it was like, yeah, I'll do that. But then I thought, right, everyone's talking about this. The audience really shaped the challenge. They would say, "Oh my God, Hung's going to do this thing." I thought, "Oh shit! If they really think I'm going to do this thing, I can't now not do this thing." So then I realized, right, I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to just stay on screen all the way through. So there was some late kind of corrects on the schedule where I had to step in to remove hosts, if you like, and take on that role. Reclaim the role, so to speak, and do it that way. But yeah, I mean, organization, learn a ton, man. Learn exactly how not to do things, but also learn a few things on what you can control, what you can't. and the importance of having great people involved. Great people not only on the back office operating it, but people front office as well, stepping forward and being prepared to host a track or whatever. And people like you, man, like individuals who are prepared to be flexible during the day. People may not be aware, but you, Lars, were scheduled to be on the marathon maybe an hour before you actually did come on. But the requirement was that you were going to be available when I needed you, and you were. So, it was that sort of vibe and that sort of attitude. So, what really gave me heart in all of this was this sense that the entire community wanted it to succeed, and were doing stuff like you were doing. They were prepared to be flexible, prepared to put the idea first, prepared to do what required to be done. There was people in Australia, I should tell, they know who they are. They want to keep like completely anonymous for some reason. But there were people in Australia who were working overnight. They actually did the marathon with me in the back office. And they were telling me actually the lights went off in the office they were in for about 7 hours. So they were working in the dark, just keeping the thing going, because that was the commitment. So yeah, huge group effort. And people ended up, I think, really being just cheering it on, which is fantastic to be part of. It felt in the end that everyone was rooting for us to do the 24 hours and getting value out of it, man. I mean, the amazing people who were on the show, amazing interviews, presentations, the panels, and all the rest of that stuff. It was fabulous. And that content is now available for views. So 40 hours of content. Because we were running multi-track, so just 24 hours. We were running 3 tracks simultaneously, which it turned out was the reason why we got booted off. Because I hadn't realized that we maxed out on the video storage on the platform on the max plan by running these tracks concurrently, and by doing that, basically we topped out on the maximum monthly allocation. And we weren't able to reactivate. So we had to spin up an entirely new event from an entirely new account and get that up and running, and basically clone the sessions. As I was on air, the back office was like literally cloning the previous event and getting it remarketed out there. So incredible effort. But I'm putting a blog post about it now. We'll talk it through. And you'll be amazed at how many fail points there would have been, critical fail points that didn't fail, that made it happen. And it turned out the one thing that did break it was the disaster recovery plan that I implemented in anticipation of a failure. So it's one of those examples of where your disaster recovery plan creates the catastrophe. So it's like Chernobyl. You remember the HBO series? But it turned out that Chernobyl exploded because they were running a test to stop, to test it to see whether it was robust enough. It was a test that created.
That's a big failure. That test didn't work out so well.
Dude, this is what happened with us. We had a fail safe that I thought would be the thing that guaranteed it wouldn't fall over, but that was the thing that caused it to fall over. That's how it ran.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting seeing the whole community kind of come together around this. I mean, I think from the moment you announced you were doing it to when it went live was, correct me if I'm wrong, but around 2 weeks. Like, it wasn't a lot of lead time to put that together, and to see everybody kind of step up and want to get involved was pretty awesome. How are you now? Like, 24 hours straight of anything is brutal. Like, what was your recovery like post marathon?
Honestly, this is the first day, which is the seventh day. So it's actually been a calendar week. Is the first day where I've just felt normally tired, meaning I feel a bit sleepy. I could do with a nap. But the previous 6 days, I felt like I had like sleep deprivation, which I did. Like sleep deprivation, brain was not functioning, couldn't look at anything. I made loads of mistakes, just literally like my brain was like obviously sleep deprived for that period. It was tough. It was really tough. It was tough to do it. And it was, the aftermath was really difficult as well. It wasn't one of these where you could just sleep one day through and then be all right. It took me a good 5-6 days, maybe not even now. I'm going to sleep at like 7:00 p.m. in the evening just to make sure I get some Zeds. So, but yeah, I'm coming out of it, but it took a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's a physical toll that we're just not used to.
No.
I do have one viewer question coming in from LinkedIn. This is from Vidya. She's watching from India, and she is new to Brainfood, and so she's curious as a new subscriber, as a new follower. So should she go back through the old catalog? Where should she jump in? What's the best way for her to kind of indoctrinate herself to all things Brainfood?
Okay, so firstly, sign up to it, Nydia. So it's recruitingbrainfood.com. It's a once a week curated and contextualized email. And that's all you're going to get. So basically, I'm not going to keep bombing you with emails. You get once a week. But you can also look at the archive, which all of the 184 newsletters previously sent are available online for you to review. We've also created a load of apps which can help the community explore the content. So we have the Brainfood Larder, which is all the English term for like a food store. You can go and search that. There's about 3,000 articles in there, which are sorted through tags and through keyword search. We've also launched a chatbot. We launched that during the marathon, actually. You could, if you're on WhatsApp, you can simply communicate with that chatbot and retrieve the content that way also. And we launched the food hall as well, which is our kind of a public gallery of people who've contributed to the community. So feel free to join that. And it's also a place where you could browse content, but additionally explore the community and potentially connect with other people there as well.
Yeah, and let's talk about, you're based in London. So for viewers that couldn't tell by that fine accent, Hung is based in London. You've been self-isolating and quarantining, solo in your apartment since this began. So how are you? Like, what has that experience been like for you? Being kind of locked inside of four walls on your own. What's the vibe in London right now? Like, tell me a little bit about what you're experiencing.
You know what? It's interesting to study it. I think that I think everyone has a different experience, but they all go through the same trajectory, if that makes any sense. So the trajectory is this denial, it's not happening. Then it is happening. You think it's going to be over pretty soon. Then you realize, all my plans for 2020 are no longer happening. The realization that dives in, there's kind of a little bit of depression. You might then get angry at somebody, at something, and look to blame folks for the end of your plan, so to speak. But then after about week 3, 4, you kind of get into it. You sort of think, okay, this is the new reality. What can I do about this? There's lots of things you can't do, so your frustration disappears. You can't control that this is happening throughout the world. You can only control your own attitude and your own behaviors. And you end up doing stuff. So I've been super productive in the course of this time. The marathon being an example, getting the chatbot out, another example, getting the food hall out, another example. I mean, of course, I'm coordinating and working with other people to do all this. But it means that, you can do stuff. So mentally, I think I'm okay. I'm at the point where, of course, it's been a long while since I've been in any kind of human contact. I think, I haven't touched a human being for about 6 weeks now, which is obviously weird. And there's obviously folks that you miss, all of these things. But the two things that I kind of hold on to when I'm looking at all of this, in fact, the 3 things I hold on to. Number 1, by no means do I have it as bad as other people. I always am very conscious of this. I am by myself in this apartment, but you know what? That is a blessing compared to people that are in places where they perhaps are not comfortable, and they're locked in, or if it's overly busy. I can imagine it being very, very difficult if there's zero privacy. You're in a house share of 6 people. That would be very tough. Secondly, this is shared adversity. So the entire planet, so to speak, is almost doing this. So you are not exceptional by having to deal with this problem. Everyone is encountering it. That helps you psychologically because it means that, this is actually a weird shared global experience. And that helps us all connect in a way that I think we can't We don't quite understand what that means, but I think we will do over the next coming months and years. And thirdly, you see these amazing initiatives that are occurring, these amazing collaborations that are happening. Most of the time not happening at the governmental level, it has to be said, but we're seeing it at the corporate level, company level, we're seeing it at the community level, we're seeing it at the neighborhood level, and at the individual level. And all of these things give me a huge amount of optimism for the future, even though that's a future that we have to fight for. What we have seen is great evidence of human capacity to collaborate, to solve problems and build, if you like, a new reality. But we've also seen some of the opposite examples, where there's individuals or people that seek to deflect, seek to blame, seek to divide. Those types of behaviors, I think, are also evident. So the way I see it is, there's a lot of things you've got to be optimistic about the human spirit. The future, when it gets made, is there to be made, but it's also there to be fought over. And it will be those two competing visions. How do you see the world? Do you see the world as one where human beings can actually extraordinarily collaborate to create amazing things? Or do you see the world as some sort of, dog-eat-dog environment, where you can only win if someone else loses? And that's what motivates me now, to do what I can, because I think that reality, everyone has a responsibility to try and make the reality that you want happen. It won't just be delivered to us.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And not that you need any validation on that last statement, but you're certainly somebody who is steering things in that direction. And I think a lot of people are looking to you in that light and wanting to emulate and kind of pick up some of the projects and the efforts that you've been leading to help do that. So keep doing that. The world needs it. We all need it. And I want to actually, so I want to thank you for coming on, guest number 2. But before we wrap up, I want to actually walk you through the final segment for the show, which is one good thing. So you'd mentioned you're reading a lot, you're consuming a lot of content, you're having conversations, you're maintaining your community ties, even though you're kind of in isolation right now. Share one good thing with us. It could be something you've read, a conversation you've had, something that made you smile. What's one good thing from Hung Lee from the past week?
One good thing, very clearly, for some reason, I can't get this thing out of my mind. It's actually a baby frog. So people might not know this, but essentially I keep frogs, right? That's one of the things I do as a hobby. Not only frogs, turtles, eels, shrimp, that kind of thing. So I've got a lot of these tanks going in the apartment. And as an absolute miracle, one of the tanks, which is a frog tank, always used to produce tadpoles, but none of the tadpoles made it because the adults actually consume the tadpoles, right? And it's like a bit of a sad thing, and I'm always looking for that one tadpole to make it. Anyway, one of them has made it, and is a little tiny frog. Because it's so small, it kind of disappears in the undergrowth, and I don't see him, and I'm always worried to say, oh shit, has the little froglet to being swallowed by the adults in some sort of horrific scenes that's out of camera. But yeah, this week I spotted the little guy. There he was in the corner, swimming away quite happily, and he's still around and looking a little bit bigger than he did before. So yeah, that made me smile and that made me happy.
Nice. Well, I hope the little guy thrives, gets bigger, and maybe this is the start of a new trend in the tank.
The kid's a champion. The kid's a champion to have made it this far. I hope he or she continues to thrive and adds to the population in that tank.
There you go. Well, look, we can all learn something. It's a valuable lesson for all of us. Real quick before we wrap up, for viewers again who are turned on you for the first time, what's the best way for them to connect with you, follow you, be in touch with your stuff?
Okay, so I normally say connect with me on LinkedIn, but the truth is I'm maxed out on LinkedIn on the connections there. So the best way is definitely follow the newsletter. Just go to recruitingbrainfood.com, follow the newsletter there. Email me if you are a follower. I tend to get round to that. If not, Twitter is always good. There's no limit on the follows there. So follow me there and DM me or something. Facebook as well. I'm basically everywhere, and I'm happy to connect in most circumstances. But the email is definitely the number one.
Yeah, you are an omnipresent guy, and we appreciate that. So thanks so much for tuning in to episode 2. That's a wrap for today. We'll be back tomorrow at noon with Caitlin Holloway. Caitlin's a great friend. She's a partner at Initialize Capital. She's a former head of people at Reddit. So tune in for that. And Hung, enjoy the rest of your week. And thanks so much for coming on.
I will do, man. Take care, everyone.